Good morning, everyone. We're going to start this morning. Thank you for joining the legislative coffee presented by the League of Women Voters and the Kansas Public Library. I'm Carol Davis, and I'm the Executive Director for the libraries. So welcome to the main library. This morning, we will hear from 4 of our Kansas legislators. We're waiting on 2 right now. Hopefully, they can just come and join us. And please note that all Wyandotte County legislatures were invited to participate. So for those of you online, we are offering closed captions. If you do not see the captions, please click the CC button at the bottom of the Zoom window and choose show captions. A link to the full forum guidelines will be placed in chat, but I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items before we begin. This is an educational, nonpartisan event for the general public. Legislators will each have a 3-minute opening statement and will have 3 minutes each to answer the questions during the question and answer period. We will provide a visual notice of time remaining at 1 minute at a time. Moderator, maybe I guess, may extend time as conversation allows. This legislative coffee is being recorded. No problem. Welcome. The partner organizations co-sponsoring this forum believe that democracy works best when citizens are informed and active. We hope this virtual coffee provides you the opportunity to learn more about our legislators and what is happening in the State House. We will begin with each of our legislators speaking for 3 minutes about what they have been doing in Topeka. We will then move to the question and answer session. Questions will be submitted via paper forms for those in the audience and via the chat function for those joining us by Zoom. Joining us today is Representative Pam Curtis, District 32, Representative Melissa Oropeza, District 37. We are waiting on Representative Marvin Robinson from District 35. And we have Dr. Valdenia Wynn, District 34. Welcome, everyone. Representative Curtis, thank you for joining us today, and welcome. Your 3 minutes begins now.
Thank you, and thank you, Carol, and thank you, everybody, for being here. We really appreciate this opportunity and appreciate the Public Library and the League of Women Voters for hosting these coffees and giving us a chance to talk about legislative issues that we're considering in Topeka. So in redistricting, my district did change a little bit. My new boundaries are I am Missouri River on the east side, State Avenue on the north, I-635 on the west, and then I-70 on the south. So it didn't change a whole lot, but just a little bit. This year, I am on some different committees than what I've been on in the past. I'm on the Appropriations Committee, the Ag and Natural Resource Budget Committee, Judiciary. I also serve on the Joint Committee of Information Technology, as well as the Information Technology Executive Council. Last year, I was on the 2022 Special Committee on Workforce Development. So a lot of those recommendations are now working their way through the legislature, which dealt with improving our workforce issues. A lot of that dealt with housing and childcare, as well as workforce training. And then, you know, we are a citizen legislature, so we are in Topeka for a 90-day session. And so the other part of the year, I work for the Greater Kansas City Chamber of Commerce for Joe Reardon. We're now 18 years together, 4 places. So I'm very thankful of their support. Otherwise, it would be very difficult for me to be able to serve my community in the legislature. So I do appreciate their support. And, you know, we work on a lot of great issues over there as well, including the Welcoming Kansas City. And then we will be working a lot to make sure that our city is ready for the World Cup, which is coming in a couple of years. And that will be one of those transformational events happening in our area. So anyway, I will stop there and pass the mic. Carol, do you just want me to pass it down to the next person, or do you have an order?
I just want to say thank you.
You're welcome.
And now we have Representative Melissa Oropeza. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Melissa Oropeza, and I am a new freshman representative. So, and I continue to work part-time during the legislative session. And I want to thank Wyandotte County for sending me up to Topeka for the 37th district. I am also the first nurse practitioner to serve in the legislative in Kansas legislature. So that is also a very big honor for myself. And I want to thank Wyandotte County and District 37 for sending me there. Being a freshman, I'm learning, so I'm so glad that Pam, you're here, because I'm not sure how much I would have to share. So for me, it's my fifth week, and it's been very exciting, and I'm learning a lot, and learning a lot from my Democratic colleagues as well as a few of my Republican ones. So thank you.
Thank you. And now Representative Dr. Virginia Wynn. Thank you for joining us today and welcome.
Yes, yes. Yes. Okay. Good morning. And again, thank you for coming out this morning. It's a little warmer. No snow. But still, nevertheless, we appreciate you coming out. We appreciate coming home and being able to interact with our friends and neighbors. See some familiar faces I haven't seen in a while, people I used to work with, and former students. But I am Valina Wynn. I have in my 12th session, and it's all a learning curve. Trust me, every session, learn something new. You learn some new strategy you need to use because the Kansas legislature, over my past 22 years, some issues have not been positive for our community, and so it's a challenge. I always try to remain a little positive, but know good and well when you get up on Monday morning, you're going to have a challenge for those next 4 or 5 days in fighting for public education, fighting for working families, fighting for labor, fighting for things that our community needs. So I am honored this term to be having been elected the assistant minority leader. So I take some of the bullets first, and I'm proud that I do and I can. Yeah, I got a little bit of a reputation as being a fighter, so that does help, but it's still we have to remain focused on what for us works for people, works in the benefit of people. I'm still the ranking on K-12 education budget, and for the past 22 years, there's always been that little chip away at public education. And in the last couple of years, it's been a bigger chip and a bigger chip. And so this session is a full-blown frontal attack. Universal vouchers. And the open borders that passed last year is not scheduled to come into effect until 24, 25. Tax credits for and essentially all students. Now, there are some schools in our district that do benefit from the ability that for parents to pull their students out in another school and do get a tax credit. So I'm not challenging that, but every time you expand that, you're pulling money away from public education. And my issue is, let's work on public education. Let's try to figure out why it's not working. And we know we've got challenges in our district, in our county, about our public schools. So I never shy away from that reality. But it's there's just a lot of proposals. Even we have gained a couple seats, But still, there's a supermajority in the House. There's still a very challenging Senate. Do have a second floor. And so it's always, can we sustain a veto? But it's, we live to fight another day. And we don't give up. And that's one thing, whether you agree with us or not. The ones from Wyandotte County, we are there for Wyandotte County. And we battle a little bit between each other, you know, come on, we're people. But we give it, it's kind of like you keep your dirty laundry at home. And we do fight together in the legislature. So looking forward to questions. Thank you for coming out. And it's good to come home to see friendly faces. Thank you.
Thank you all. Now we will move on to our questions. Wyandotte County is constantly ranked at alarmingly low rates when it comes to the health of its citizens. One of the biggest reasons for that is lack of access to medical care. What is the current status of expanding Medicaid in Kansas?
Take the first one. Every 8:30 every Monday morning. Minority leader and myself meet with the speaker. So 2 to 3 weeks ago, you know, we go around, you know, what's on your agenda, what's on your agenda. So if you know me, I went straight for the China clause. I said, so what about Medicaid expansion? And out blinking, no. So I said, oh, okay. But you know, I'm not going to miss an opportunity to say, is there some wiggle room? Is, you know, what's going to give? And he straight out tells me, nope, he's not interested in it, has never been interested in it. And so, you know, of course, we leave like, okay, we got to figure out another strategy. So that's my answer. But then.
So from what I know, I serve on Health and Human Services, and from what I understand, anything that comes out of that committee has the potential to be have a gut and go for Medicaid expansion. So I'm not real sure what's going to be coming out of that committee, regardless if it's specific to Medicaid expansion or not, just because that is an opportunity that can be used.
It is an uphill battle. It's like unreasonable as to why they oppose it, and I just don't have any idea what arguments we could make to change some of their minds. But there have been bills introduced both on the Senate and House side for Medicaid expansion in the past week or so. We'll just have to see what happens there. There's also impact as far as access to health as they change the COVID to not be any longer a public health emergency. So that's another thing that we need to watch, because that's going to kick some people off of Medicaid potentially. And then just generally, because part of that question was about our ranking in the health rankings. And a lot of those rankings, when you look at it, it's not necessarily access to healthcare, but it's really the social determinants of health. And that when I worked for Mayor Joe Reardon, when we were in the mayor's office, that was when we started Healthy Communities Wyandotte to really try to get at some of those issues, which, you know, go from anywhere of making sure that we're increasing high school, you know, graduation rates to early learning. There's just, you know, to access to physical, you know, physical activity. So there's like a whole bunch of things that we could do to make our community healthier. And then also this would be something that definitely Representative Oropeza could talk to, would be the increasing access through telehealth, so that people would have, you know, better access. To go along with that, we got to make sure people have broadband. So everything is connected. But I don't know, do you want to talk a little bit more about the access through telehealth? Or the impact of it?
I personally have used telehealth since it started during the pandemic to provide care And I provide care all over Kansas, 3 and 4 hours away, and people even in rural Kansas are very happy to have that opportunity just to connect with somebody, even if it's over video, to talk about potential interventions. And there's a lot you can tell over video. It's not perfect, but it does work. Broadband would definitely be a #1 priority. That's what you have to have in order to do telehealth. I've also visited with people and provided care in Wyandotte County, just if they had several things going on, they had a car issue, daycare issues. I know I talked to a lot of different people who watch their grandchildren, and this was just easier. They set them off to play and we chit chat and we have our appointments. So it is really a wonderful benefit that's come out of the pandemic. A lot of bad things happened during the pandemic, but this is definitely a positive for healthcare and going forward. And I'm hoping that'll never change because it is very much needed and very much appreciated by all patients that I work with.
And then as Pam mentioned, the health determinants, when you look at the ranking, it includes such things as smoking, teenage pregnancy, air quality. So a lot of those issues may or may not be state issues, they are local issues. They're private business issues as far as the pollutants that are in the air and from our industrial areas. So that if access to Medicaid is not available, then we have to look at the larger picture and see what we can do. Because if that's not going to happen soon, but we still have people, ill health, large teenage pregnancies. I've been pulling my hair out for many years on infant mortality and maternal health. But we haven't been able to get any type of collective conversation on a lot of these issues. So I don't know that the strategy of collective thinking and collective reform for our community, but I don't believe, I know healthy communities working, but we still have people seriously dying. Thank you.
Thank you.
Don't want to be a Debbie Downer. It's super serious.
The last minimum wage increase occurred in 2008 when it was raised to its current amount of $7.25 per hour. Are there any serious discussions currently going on to raise the minimum wage? If so, what is the status of those discussions and what are the next steps to getting it increased and how much of an increase could be?
I just know of one bill that's in the Senate that would allow local units of government to establish their own local minimum wage. And then to go along with that, there's also a bill that I think 38 sponsors signed on to return local control for the purposes of paying prevailing wage. So I don't know that I have not heard any discussion about, have you guys heard any discussion about increasing the minimum wage at a statewide level? But definitely there are discussions. This is one thing that is a common discussion that's a little bit related in our budget committees, is just the need to increase salaries for state employees and then also offering bonuses, because we have a lot of vacancies. And the reason we have vacancies is that we can't compete with the private sector. And, some of them are like specialized engineers and attorneys. And so trying to offer bonuses to attract them, because that impacts, our water quality and, it could be pretty serious. So anyway, but I have not heard of anything at a statewide level. But there are some related discussions about increasing wages. And the market is kind of put it in the employees, have given them a good bargaining position these days.
Thank you. With damaging educational bills such as HB 2218 voucher bill being fast-tracked through committees, if passed, what impact would that have on already underserved school districts such as USD 500? And what can the people of Wyandotte County do to make sure that harmful bills such as this one do not pass?
So 2288 is identified as a sunflower equity act, which is far from the truth. And you have, if you live in Western Wyandotte, you can reach out and touch your representative out there and tell him that you do not support it. I won't name his name, but you know who he is. It probably will pass the House. It does have some provisions that are questionable. I would hope the governor would veto it, but I do not believe it will stand alone. It will probably be bundled, and then that makes it difficult to work out. Impact, the impact it has, to make it a little better, the proponent has tried to phase it so that first year, 300% eligibility, low income eligibility, 2,000 students maximum. Essentially, 2,000 students statewide could leave public schools, go to a private school. But honestly, it would only impact your larger urban areas. There are 64, 65 counties out of 105 that have no private schools. And so those students, those parents can't use it there. They know that. So you're targeting your urban schools. Second year, it is revised to be 400% of poverty level, 4,000 students max. Now, you say that's not a lot of students because there are like 500,000 students across Kansas. Once again, in those 64, 65 counties, there are no private schools. The third year, the cap is off. No income eligibility, no limit. As it stands now, there's $150 million fiscal note. That's the cost of administering. 95% of the base aid goes to the student. People always complain that if you get, the parent wants to take the kid out, but there's no money. This would allow 95% of base aid to follow the student. That alone is an impact. So it is serious. I would bet your money that it will pass the House. I don't know anything about the Senate. I don't know if there's a corresponding bill in the Senate, but we're going to fight tooth and nail and show all the gaps, and we will work across the aisle to work with some of the moderates, showing that it will not benefit their students and their districts, and we'll play the numbers game. Remember, you had that 63 to pass the House, and we have 40. So we have to find the 25 friends and like-minded people, and we're going to work that direction.
And then when the governor vetoes it, we have to find two Republicans to sustain a veto. So that's our challenge.
Thank you. What is your position on school vouchers?
No, no, and no. Because, again, you haven't fully funded special ed now. Now, again, what's very important is how you spend the money. We've got to keep track of that. But if you start just taking 150 million out right now, when you could fully fund special ed at 92% and 130 million, why? But again, yes, parents are the first teachers. They should have the opportunity to do what they want to benefit their child. No one disagrees with that. But the public school system we have to take every student. We have to educate every student. Private schools can go, nah, don't like her, too many challenges. We have no provisions to do special ed. We can cherry pick. And the teachers do not have to be licensed. I mean, there's all this whole list of criteria that private schools do not have to meet. But to just drain the, just to have a sieve for the public dollar to go directly, I oppose. And say, let's work on the system that has to educate every kid. And we've got to work hard at that. So I don't think you probably know how I feel.
And I just have one comment from our last forum. If anybody was there, we did have a mother stand up about their newly diagnosed autistic kindergartner. And there was one program in USD 500. Maybe there might have been more people, but unfortunately she was not able to get that for her child. And she had to drive 20 to 30 minutes away over to Johnson County. And if you don't remember, she herself is dealing with health issues. So this is going to impact neighbors, friends, people on your street. So please remember that and reach out, especially even if, people who live in other districts, it's time to put the pressure on.
Thank you. Governor Kelly recently unveiled her plan to fully fund special education for the first time in a long time. What does getting that passed look like, and how can the community help to support this plan?
Yes, friends, in other districts, you have to reach out to them. Because that is the only way, in my opinion, legislators who are not in alignment will understand that their constituents believe special ed should be fully funded. And remember, special ed includes gifted students. So it is a large body of students who, yes, the most vulnerable, but also gifted. And again, it is what is happening in the budget committee is an attempt to slow it down, also do a different kind of math and saying, you're doing 92% now. And the districts are saying, no, we're not. But one bill that will pass will establish a task force. And that, you always hear kicking the can down the road. So a task force will look at it, fine, but that should not slow down the funding. So that is the what is happening. Chances are there will be an additional funding, but I don't believe it will be the 103 million that comes up to most people's math.
Thank you. What are your views on the anti-trans legislation happening during this legislative session?
I haven't seen the bill. I do know there's one over in the Senate. So until I see the bill, I, for the most part, spoke against it. Last year, we had not seen the bill at all, and it came to the House. But that in general, our caucus does not promote discrimination against anybody. And so that is the position of our caucus. That's about all I know at this time.
Yeah, I mean, last year we were pretty strong in our opposition to, and I think it is pretty much very similar legislation that they're trying to pass. So we will once again oppose that. But I think one other thing that people don't realize is that, this hurts us in so many ways. It's discriminatory. It hurts those people. Number one, it hurts people. And then number two is that, we have some transformational things coming to our region. We have the NFL draft coming in a few months, and then we have the World Cup in a couple of years. We don't get those things. We don't get those kind of events if we have discriminatory laws on our books. And so it impacts us in a lot of ways. And so we should really think about that. the tourism people were there last week and I stopped over, and that was one of the issues that they were talking to all of us about, is that any kind of policy like this will really hurt our tourism industry. And so they were really asking us to oppose any kind of discriminatory practices such as that. So perhaps there's, you know, more people looking at it from different perspectives and being a little more understanding, hopefully. Thank you.
Thank you. Somebody wrote, I attended KCK Chamber Legislative meeting and learned that over 700 bills have been introduced. Please talk about how difficult it is to get a bill passed.
Tell you about my experience. And it was just an amendment. And I changed just a few words, which I thought would make the bill better. And it did not go well. It was shot down like a burning flame. So that's been my only experience thus far. It just didn't go well. I don't know about me.
We're just outnumbered. So, you know, it just takes a lot of luck and a lot of persistence. So the legislation I have had luck in getting passed, a lot of it has come through conference committees, which I hate that process really, but you know, you kind of work with the cards you're dealt. And so, and then the other trick, you know, for me is to make them committee bills. So sometimes people say, well, you haven't really sponsored that many bills. Like, well, I have, they just don't have my name on them. Because that's kind of a red flag too. Like if a Democrat has their name on a bill, sometimes it just won't go anywhere. So there's some bills that you want to, like just recently, the prevailing wage bill, it's all Democrats. I could, you know, I asked a few Republicans to sign on, but didn't have much luck. But we want to be very loud and clear on where we are on that issue. But on another bill that I've been working on now for 4 years, with Healthy Communities Wyandotte and their policy committee, which has grown to be a statewide coalition, is an automated process to expunge records, criminal records. And so it's kind of referred to as like a clean slate in other states. And so anyway, that has been 4 years in the process. So it just passed unanimously out of committee. And so it's sitting below the line on the House calendar, and I'm going to work like heck to try to get it above the calendar. But it takes a long time sometimes to pass legislation.
Well, this year I've chosen an easy button. Introduced a bill to have a mural of the first Kansas colored infantry on the wall. First African American unit to fight in the Civil War from Kansas, not Massachusetts, not like the movies, Glory. But so it I had Mr. Owens, the local historian, testify in committee. And it was the Veterans and Military Committee. And so it passed unanimously out of that committee. And now it's sitting below the line. Again, a strategy to work across the aisle. I had the cooperation of the senator to introduce the same bill in the Senate. And so it, I think, should have gone to final action maybe Monday because it was sitting on the consent calendar in the Senate. So needless to say, art is important, muralism is important, representation is important, but veterans couldn't very easily oppose a bill that honored veterans. And so we'll see how that pans out. But those bills that deal with public education, wages are harder, much harder. Wow.
Welcome, Representative Robinson. Give you 3 minutes just to introduce yourself.
Good morning. My name is Marvin. That's Robinson II. I've been in the legislature for 32 days. And a Navy veteran, mission specialist, OI division. 3 years active duty, 3 years reserve duty. 35 years and 9 months of having worked with the Under Overlands Underground Railroad exercise. I was on the phone with a couple of people earlier today. And that helped to delay me, plus these two had meetings about meetings, 4 meetings, meeting. And it's an honor, it's a humbling experience. My first vote, they were debating on rules change. And I voted yes, because I just wanted them to hurry up and sit down and shut up. And that was the wrong vote. It was over a majority minority rule, you know, or meeting halfway in the middle. And I was just like, they said they wasn't gonna change nothing, so let's, you know, and that went over 2 hours and 37 minutes. And so they did come up with the conclusion that they weren't gonna change the rules. And so I would apologize for being late, but you have to always wear, you know, when I've been to the cleaners and then rest here. And it's like, for me, it's like being in a speed university, one classroom after the next all day. You're learning, you know, and so it's a high privilege. And I only promise to try to do the best that I can. Thank you.
Thank you.
I've got to go for 100 minutes.
Last year, Missouri was able to place recreational cannabis on their ballot and pass the measure. There seems to have been many talks about medicinal cannabis finally being legalized and bringing us closer to being on par with all of our bordering states. What is the current status of getting at least a medicinal cannabis bill passed? And there's another question after that. What about HB 2363 to decriminalize marijuana? 2363.
As you can tell, we scramble when you guys give us bill numbers. There's like hundreds of bills. It's hard to remember all of them. The House actually has passed medical marijuana and it stalls out in the Senate. So we thought that there was hope because of the, you know, what they were saying, that there might be hope to get it through, but I don't know. I know last week, I don't know if it's been introduced, but I signed on to, as a co-sponsor, I think maybe several of us may have, for a bill for medical, to approve medical marijuana. I mean, you're right, we're surrounded. It at some point becomes unenforceable. At the very least, we should be looking at decriminalization because we don't want to just start filling up our jails with people who are, you know, driving through our state. And then that's, you know, that's the other problem, as I talked about the regional events and all that are coming, you know, we drive around every day. How many of us pay attention when we're crossing that state line? So just imagine, you know, people just visiting our community, you know, how confusing that's going to be for them too. So anyway, it's going to take putting some pressure, I think, on getting particularly the medical done, but we need to start also looking at the criminal penalties side of it as well. And at the very least, having local jurisdictions decriminalizing, if not, you know, like a statewide, some kind of statewide decriminalization.
The Democratic caucus will roll out their plan on Monday in a press conference at 11 a.m. because we are pro forma. And it will include support for legalization. And there is one bill that will suggest, I don't know the details of it, but that those who are incarcerated for just small amounts of possession, reform that. And then, of course, medical. But there will be a provision there will be a comment. If not, I don't think you've introduced any legislation to support the adult use of recreation. And mainly because of our border states and the impact. And I'm sure there is some reference to revenue.
Thank you. Okay, there is a House bill currently in committee concerning the COLA for teachers on capers. Kansas Association for Retired School Personnel is against it because of the way it is funded. Usually they support bills concerning a cost of living increase. Correct.
Who's opposing it?
Parks Kansas Association of Retired School Personnel. We usually support that if it's the way it's being funded. Opposed to.
Okay, so it's probably in House policy, education, and not K-12, so I haven't seen it. Bill number, I can find.
I don't have it.
Okay, like COLA. I'm not familiar with it, but I will look into it. Because if you all as retired persons are not supporting it, it must be the tough team taking the revenue from what existing retirees or what is?
I'm not quite sure, but it's. My understanding was that they would not be coming through parks. I mean, through
Capers?
papers. It would be the support for.
I'll look into it.
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with it. Thank you.
Sure. They talked about that the other day, government budget meeting. And they said that a lot of the retired public safety workers, police, sheriffs, firemen, live Piper. And they had one set of capers upon their retirement. And it stripped them of the extra additional increases. And they want to go back to that. And so they asked the legislative research office to come up with this third tier. So that the retirees can elevate their cost of living and secure their capers. And I asked them to repeat it all over again so I could take notes because it's like I said, it's like a speed university. They're gonna bring back their findings next week on how to do that to accommodate the people that are already retired with the cost of living increases so that they can. So I don't know if that's the same thing with the teachers, but that's what they said about the others. They just have to have that increase if it doesn't do what. Yeah.
And I would take this opportunity to really let the constituents know, as you all know, that we serve on different committees, but then we don't always, until it comes to the floor, we don't get that bill briefing on kind of what the vote would be and what our constituents would want. So if there's something like this, please send an email. I know maybe not, they won't like that, but I will, just because it'll give me time to look things up and to really see what that means. Get with the Democrat that's on that committee and say, okay, this is what my constituents are saying. I want to pass this on to you, their concerns, those types of things. So then that way, at least we can be informed of what we want here or what our constituents would want to see.
And we have a hotline, so you can call and give us a message. So we need to get that number out.
Thank you.
Local control again under attack. Bills dealing with election or electing taxes, government competition, renewable energy are all moving and getting support from many legislators. Why do so many legislators hate local government? All of them, I don't know what that word is, all of them would add cost, I think. Sorry.
There's a constant, I mean, it's kind of odd because, you know, we talk a lot about, and you hear a lot, oh, we support local control, but then when it comes right down to it, no, they don't support local control. And, you know, there's several things that happen, like there's, you know, like the legislators think that some idea that they have should be implemented statewide, but then you also have, you know, entities outside of us that put that pressure on. They can't solve something locally, so then they come to the legislature and want to impose something that is like statewide, like prevailing wage is a perfect example. You know, in 2013, they just stripped us of the ability to require the prevailing wage be paid. You know, there's another bill that would say that local government cannot ban plastic bags in their communities. So Mike Kane is here and he.
I'm about to bust right here.
Like, Mike, how many things do we tell you that like at the local level, and like Mike Taylor has lived through this as well? Like, we're constantly, is that correct? Like,
Example of what they did is the food sales tax.
yes,
The food sales tax affected Wyandotte County, Orange, Topeka, and Wichita, Democratic strongholds. You know, they have constantly blocked the minimum wage, the prevailing wage. The prevailing wage, and I'm going to use the Amazon project as an example. They let the local workers here do three things: put a flagpole in, a fence, and air conditioning. And look how big that project is. Most of those folks were from Texas. So what happens if we bring somebody from Texas, Minnesota, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and I work for Laborers 1290, that means our folks have to travel on the road to get just to find work. And they're really good at saying, we're with you right now. And at the time when it comes up to go to a vote, well, we're not with you. And it's just a mean-spirited thing. And I'm telling you, I was up there 4 days this week, and these guys do a great job. And it's an uphill battle every day, and there's no way in hell. But we have to let them know what our concerns are, the hotline or whatever it is. You know, to say, hey, folks, we need people up there. We had a Labor Day deal up there not too long ago, mentioned the issues just from the union side. But whatever it is, it's the school funding and stuff like that, you know, the special needs kids. You know, they, oh yeah, we're with you. No, we're not. You know, they lie out of both sides of their mouth. And we have to do stuff like what we're doing right now. Tell them what we need, but we also have to support them in this. Go up there when they're testifying. Testify yourself. It's not that hard, you know, but we have to support these folks, you know, and I'm blessed to get paid to do it. But I tell you, it's Pat Petty said something 2 years ago, and she was 100% right on prevailing wage. And they said, boom, you're not going to get it. And I squeezed the chair and pulled a muscle in my shoulder. But one last story. We were in the Senate Congress deal, and there were 5 people that were injured for life. One of them was in a wheelchair, had to blow in a deal to move around. This meeting goes on for an hour. The chairperson calls timeout and comes down and hugs all 5 people. She's crying. Hell, I was crying. She said, we'll work the bill tomorrow. We showed up the next day, didn't work the bill. And when she left the room, I got kicked out of the building. But how can you know that $140,000 is not enough money for a lifelong injury? One lady got hurt while she was pregnant. She can't even pick up her baby because her elbows are so messed up. And yet in the meeting, we'll work it the next day. Next day, same group of people are in there. And she forgot what was going on. So God love you guys for what you're doing, and I damn sure wouldn't do it.
Thank you.
I like to chime in on that. Yesterday, this situation came within the government budget and committee in the House, and the bill was going through really smooth. And one of the the vice chair or co-chair of the committee, ranking minority House member, suggested I believe it was $120 million start for ad valorem on personal property relief and small business relief. And it got seconded by one of the ranking Republican co-chair, and then another one said yes. And then somebody else said, well, you know, in my community, it doesn't do any good to give the residents a personal property tax relief, because when we've done that, when we've done that in the past, then those jurisdictions use that as a windfall, and they go up on the people's taxes even further. And then they're gonna be looking for the legislature to provide relief again. So he withdrew his motion, another guy, or his second, another guy said that he was not gonna approve it because the local governments across the state would agree and appreciate it, then they would go up and hit the residents a little later after they get the relief for the residents. I kind of thought about the Wyandotte County, local government, they did the 29% personal property relief tax. But I went on and supported the ranking minority leader because, he's been very helpful, letting me know how things maneuver, but it didn't go anywhere. We lost. And it was another one of those votes in the committee that seemed like it was, but anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there. You're learning, as you sit there and watch everything unfold. So I just wanted to share that for whatever reason. I was like,
I have one more comment on the Mike Kane's comment. It is important that people come and testify. I go into my various committees and not everybody carries a laptop. So when it's written testimony, a lot of the committees are now paperless. So I think from what I've observed, and I'm 32 days in like Representative Robinson, is when we have people who come up there and testify and share their personal stories, and you can read from a piece of paper, and if you get a group together and find out what's most important to that group and then send somebody up, or, those types of things, get organized so not everybody has to be there. That would really be helpful, because when you're in committee and facing a person and not a piece of paper, it hits home.
Can I throw out another?
Certainly, just before
I'm sorry.
Dr. Wynn.
Well, Debbie Downer here. On the voucher bill, we had 16 people testify as a proponent. We had over 500 testify as opponents, either orally or written. And we passed it out. They passed it out on a 13-4 vote. Of course, we recorded our vote as no. But that's an example of what Mike Kane said. Clearly across the state, opposition to the 2218. Didn't mean a thing because they have an agenda. But still, it's important that those 500 send that testimony, show up, the room was packed, they had dropped the air conditioner because the room was so packed. We went to 6:30, the meeting starts at 3:30. We didn't end until 6:30. But again, those 500 have friends, and we're counting on those 500 to reach out and touch their legislator to say, no, we're not going to support this. So in person, if you can, written, if you can, but we've got to know that there are folks out there who are on one side or the other. That's democracy. Sorry.
Okay, so then yesterday there was a meeting, I found out about the Kansas Corporation Commission was conducting a hearing on the utility costs. So the Board of Public Utilities in Wyandotte County is not a part of the Kansas Corporation Commission. They're their own separate entity. But they said that some of the people, the grassroots organization, said that there still needs to be some kind of consideration. And then the Kansas Corporation Commission, in their testimony, you can see it on this, on the WebEx, and then it's on YouTube as well. The Kansas Corporation Commission was sued, that's my understanding, was sued and defeated in court for allowing discrimination in utility costs. Not discrimination based on race, but on low income. That people don't have sufficient resources. So I was just like, wow. So at least Kansas Gas, they assured me that at least Kansas Gas is going to be meeting with the utility companies, Evergy, et cetera, about the utility costs for Kansas Gas and the other outlying areas that are privileged to be regulated by the Kansas Corporation Commission. Will be doing the same thing because of the lawsuit that was won. And so I just want to put it out there, because I was the only one from Wyandotte County, I think, in the room, but the other people that were there had other meetings. And I just happened to have that open slide at 9 o'clock, so I could slide in there and be nosy and learn a little bit more. And it's kind of overwhelming to see this. The people here are meeting about the BPU bills, but they weren't in the room yesterday to have their say, just to learn what people are complaining about here. They are all over the state of Kansas. And people, the energy companies are trying to assist, allow those companies to come up with a plan that's going to be more realistic, so that the profit that shareholders are the only ones who gain off of, but they're hurting the. Okay, so I just want to put it out there, you know, that it doesn't have to do with the question.
Does Wyandotte County, anyone?
I'm sorry, what?
Oh, you didn't.
No.
Okay, sorry. Does Wyandotte County delegation support SB 79, authorizing counties to impose an earnings tax?
SB 7, what is it?
SB 79.
The earnings tax for like 3 Kansas.
I guess.
Committee, assessment taxation committee introduced by the. Assessment taxation committee.
Is that like for Missouri, working through the tax sheet?
Yeah, it would.
Yeah.
It would authorize Kansas communities, local communities to impose an earnings tax. So like those of us that live on the Kansas side and work in Missouri, we pay an earnings tax to help support the infrastructure. And for years, we've tried to do that on the Kansas side, but it has run into opposition. I don't know why. Do you guys know why? Do you know why, Mike Taylor? Why?
Yeah, we had a hearing on this years ago.
Yeah.
And as I looked
Could you speak a little louder? Just a little louder.
As I looked at the tax committee when testifying in this, I saw these Johnson County reps. They don't want it because a lot of them work in Wyandotte County and they don't want to have to pay tax to us because they live in Johnson County. That's a big reason that happened.
Well, I'm supportive.
I'm supporting as well.
Yeah,
Me too. How can you help, is it Wyco, Unified Government, Wyco, KCK, solve homelessness? How can you help increase affordable housing in Wyco, KCK?
I'll start that. I mean, it's such a layered issue. But one thing that I have been trying to do to kind of help get at that a little bit is that we've been giving our rural communities for the last probably 4 or 5, even 6 years, a lot of incentives to rebuild their communities, both with how address housing issues, workforce training, etc. So the argument I started making a few years ago is, why do we keep, dividing ourselves geographically? If we really believe that, you attack to lift all boats, your most economically distressed areas, and it doesn't matter if it's a rural area or an urban area, that we should be making those incentives available to our most economically distressed areas. And so I had success last year in getting some of the housing incentives applied to the economically distressed urban areas. And there is a Senate bill, thank you to the people who helped on the housing bill last year, that will open up more of those incentives, and it's Senate Bill 34. So I am hoping that gets through this year, and that will make available more funding to address our housing issues, which I think that, when you talk about homelessness, we need more housing stock. We knocked down so much of our housing stock, and now we are suffering from that, and we don't have enough people building. We need, capacity both, to build, and then we need to figure out how we build affordable. So anybody else want to chime in on that?
We do have in the school district a program of homeless students.
Louder.
that does not, address their whole family issues and the majority of others. So that, I don't have enough thoughts on that nature.
Okay, so the issues behind retrieval. As long as the city, the local jurisdiction allows new construction to occur. And then increase the taxes of the people who have been living right there in their corridor all the time because of new construction. They don't take into account that that's helping to displace additional. Then Wyandotte County was part of the red line exhibit at Johnson County Museum for almost a year. And it was one of the most successful exhibits they've had. It's been converted and digitized. They've turned it into a book, and it's also going to travel. So people around the country will soon be able to say that this community is at the cutting edge of redlining and the structural violence, the institutional economic violence that occurs is multi-layered. From the utilities, the taxes, when the people go on people's taxes, they go on people's rent. Then we had Section 8 in Gateway. I believe Gateway townhouses, we had Section 8 in Chelsea Plaza. Those places were sold out and they don't accept Section 8 anymore because the new property owners have the right to decide what they want. But when they put in Gateway, it was supposed to be for the low to moderate income and for people that were going to the community college that was close. And you have all these people come in and change over time. And so those people, their families were displaced. A lot of those just in my clients when I did social service work. And they basically, over a period of time, they moved on. But you don't have places for the low income to even exist. Because as you can see, Juniper Gardens was just about completely obliterated. And it doesn't make a difference because now those roofs and doors and walls and windows no longer exist. But nobody's getting past the spiritual, intellectual trauma that has already been done. And so how do we get to the solutions? That's hopefully what I hope to learn to try to advance any of that. I'm sorry.
Just a comment as a senior and disabled and having gone through a lot of that. I mean, of the applications, one part, a lot of it, I think, and I maybe don't know the balance, but what I've seen is that it's at the federal level, there's separate funding for the rural through HUD. It's a separate funding program. And yeah, you have very nice housing, plenty of it in rural areas, frankly, much nicer for way lower cost. And I know there were other factors involved with cost. And then, yeah, what you frankly, having looked at Wichita in this area, is you tend to have a lot of, my cynicism is that the developers use LAHGP below income housing tax credit. They develop it to get the subsidized financing. It's frankly totally for their benefit. And as soon as they can get more money out of it, they flip it. I'm not sure how, I think a lot of the root causes federal level, I don't know how much, flexibility there is at the local level. I'm sure there's some, as you said, I think as you said, they get it, and they have the taxes and that all the costs in the surrounding area rather than actually improving and benefiting the area, even like creating more of a spiral. I wouldn't call it gentrification necessarily, but basically pricing people out. So,
We want to honor all your time, especially with this time as well. This is going to be the last question. House Bill 2111 would zero out the state sales tax for food April 1st. How likely is it that it will pass the House and Senate?
I don't know. Do you have a thought on that, Val? Because you probably are in more of those conversations than I am, but it seems like there's a little more momentum to do it. Because like now the pressure is off from the election. Because I think that was part of it. Like there was like support to do it, but they didn't want to give Governor Kelly a win that she could take into the election. But that's behind us now. So it seems like there's more support. What do you think?
That's the impression I get, but of course, never know until it happens. But we're optimistic, and that will make an impact on families. Maybe even the grocery store.
Thank you to our Wyandotte County legislators for making time to share their perspectives with us. And thank you all for joining us today and engaging in conversation. If you are unable to get if you were unable to get your questions answered, we are providing a link in the chat and a handout for those in the audience with the legislators' contact information. The League and the library will be posting a recording of this coffee on Facebook and YouTube. Please share them with your network of voters. The next virtual legislative coffee is Saturday, March 25th at 10 a.m. hosted by the Bonner Springs City Library, League of Women Voters and Bonner Springs NAACP. Thank you again, everyone.
And thank you. I've left my card back there, and essentially the email address is the same for all of us.
And if they